Putrim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayed Shunmatam Swakata Krishna Punna Shravana Kirtana Hridayantasto Hyabadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam Nashtaprayesha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatiruttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 32, Text 27. Etavan eva yogena samagreneha yoginaha yujjate abhimato hyarto yadasangastu kritsnasaha. Etavan eva yogena samagreneha yoginaha yujjate bimato hyarto yadasangastu kritsnasaha. एतावान् एव योगेन समग्रेणेह योगिनः युज्यते अभिमतो ह्यर्थो यद असंगस्तु कृत्स्नशः. Synonyms: etavan, of such a measure; eva, just; yogena, by yoga practice; samagreneha, all; iha, in this world; yoginaha, of the yogi; yujyate, is achieved; abhimataha, desired; he, certainly; artaha, purpose; yat, which; asangaha, detachment; tu, indeed; kritsnasaha, completely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: the greatest common understanding for all yogis is complete detachment from matter, which can be achieved by different kinds of yoga. Purport: there are three kinds of yoga, namely Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga. Devotees, Jnanis, and Yogis all try to get out of the material entanglement. The Jnanis try to detach their sensual activities from material engagement. The Jnana Yogi thinks that matter is false and the Brahman is truth. Therefore, by cultivation of knowledge, he tries to detach the senses from material enjoyment. The Ashtanga yogis also try to control the senses. The devotees, however, try to engage the senses in service of the Lord. Therefore, it appears that activities of the bhaktas, devotees, are better than those of yogis and jnanis. The mystic yogis simply try to control the senses by practicing the eightfold divisions of yoga: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, etc. And the jnanis try by mental reasoning to understand that sense enjoyment is false. But the easiest and most direct process is to engage the senses in the service of the Lord. The purpose of all yoga is to detach one's sense activities from this material world. The final aims, however, are different. Jnanis want to become one with Brahman effulgence, yogis want to realize Paramatma, and devotees want to develop Krishna consciousness and transcendental loving service to the Lord. That loving service is the perfect stage of sense control. The senses are actually active symptoms of life and they cannot be stopped. They can be detached only if there is superior engagement. As it is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, Param Drishtva Navartante. The activities of the senses can be stopped if they are given superior engagements. The superior engagement is engagement of senses in the service of the Lord. This is the purpose of all yoga. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नामने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणी निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. I humbly bow down to all the assembled Vaishnavas and thank you for giving me an opportunity to purify myself. So today we are in Canto 3, Chapter 32, Text 27. So this entire chapter is dedicated where Kapil Dev is instructing his mother Devahuti about the entanglement in the fruitive activities, and he also goes on to glorify the greatness of devotional service. So in the initial verses, he talks about how in a householder life people get entangled and what is the process of not getting entangled and how so devotional service is superior to other forms of fruitive activities. And then here he's talking about the common theme between the yogic paths, which is detachment from material matter. And so here he specifically talks about three types of yogis. He says the common understanding of all yogis is detachment from matter, which can be achieved by different kinds of yoga. But Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he talks about three kinds of yogis: the Bhakti yogi, the Jnana yogi, and Ashtanga yogi. But I was just when I read this purport, I was saying like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also talks about karma yogi, but Krishna doesn't, but Prabhupada doesn't mention this in the purport, and it hit me that the three yogic paths mentioned here are all wanting out of this material entanglement. For example, here Prabhupada says the jnana yogi tries to detach the sensual activities so that he can get out of this material entanglement. Ashtanga Yogi, he thinks about that the matter is false and he wants to reach the Brahman realization. And then the bhaktas, they are involved in transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so they are out of this material world as well. But the Karma Yogi, the goal of Karma Yoga is to continue in this world performing activities. So their desire is still to be in this material world and not out of this material world because they want to still do the activities which is in this material world. So that's why Srila Prabhupada specifically mentions about Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga in this. And here we've seen in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita a clear delineation as to what is the superior process. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the Ashtanga Yoga process in the sixth chapter. And then he gradually moves and explains that the bhakti is the highest form. And in the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the 46th verse, it said, Tapasvibhyo diko yogi jnanibhyo pimato dikaha karmibhyaschadiko yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. So here Krishna says that yogi is greater than an ascetic and he was greater than an empiricist and greater than the fruitive worker. So fruitive worker is the karmis are the lowest rung, and from above that is the empiricist who thinks about what is the cause of the universe and everything. That's the jnana path, and above that is the yogi, which is the Ashtanga yogi. And then that's how Krishna establishes that Ashtanga yoga is superior than jnana yoga. But in the next verse in 647, Krishna says, Yogi namapi sarvesham madgate enantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktatamo mataha. He says, of all the yogis, one who is constantly involved in thinking about me, he is the supreme, is the most superior. So Krishna clearly establishes that Bhakti Yoga is the supreme path as well. So there are in the Bhagavad Gita, it's very clearly delineated in all the three processes, namely Ashtanga Yoga, Jnana Yoga, of all the process of yogic realization. Bhakti Yoga is the highest process. But here, so what differentiates them? So Srila Prabhupada talks about that in the purport. He says that the purpose of all yoga is to detach one's activities from this world. The final aims, however, are different. So the jnanis, they start with this process of neti neti. So they start with, okay, this is not real, this is not real, this is not real, this is not real. And then they get to the point where they understand that everything stems from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the place where they reach is actually mentioned as the Brahma Jyoti. So they don't still have this knowledge of the personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Jnani, by his dint of his intelligence and by his jnana process, he's got to this stage where he's come to this realization that everything stems from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he still doesn't know that the Supreme Person has a form. And so he is attached with the Brahma effulgence, and his goal is to merge with the Brahma effulgence. And the Ashtanga Yogi is one level above, where so here the Ashtanga yogis want to realize the Paramatma. They know that so they are one level above. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's mentioned that there are three forms of realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead: Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. So it's Brahman realization is the goal of the Jnanis. And the Ashtanga yogis, the goal is to, through the process of the Ashtanga yogas mentioned as Yama is like control of senses, and then Yama and Niyama are both things to do and things not to do. And then they do asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyana, dharana, and then the last stage is samadhi. So all these 8 stages, they gradually grow and they go to a stage where they see the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature. So that's the goal of Ashtanga Yogi. And Ashtanga Yogi wants to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the Paramatma feature, but he's still, that's the goal of Ashtanga Yogi. But here it's very clearly explained that the highest stage is that of a devotee who wants to develop Krishna consciousness and transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this So the goal of life, even mentioned in the Vedas and everything, is to gain not just mukti, but to attain that fact that the Supreme Personality, attain the abode of Supreme Personality of Godhead, and to render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that loving service is the perfect stage of sense control. So even though all these three yogic paths have sense control as a common goal, but the ultimate objective is different. And it's mentioned that the Jnana yogis and Ashtanga yogis, even though they are in this path, and it's very tedious path, and Sri Krishna mentions this in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that this path of Jnana Yoga is fraught with a lot of difficulties, and but being a bhakta is very easy. And so even though it's a tedious path, there is no guarantee that you will go and attain the personal form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So how does that happen? And that's again explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's mentioned that Bhava pavargo brahmato yada bhaved janasya tarhi achyuta satsamagama satsangamo yarhi tadaiva sadgato paravareshe tvai jayate matihi. So, bhavapa vargo brahmato yada bhavaj. But having been born in this cycle of birth and death again and again and again and again, and by some fortune, janasya tarhi achyuta satsamagamaha. One gets a good fortune of meeting the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Tadaiva. So, because of that, one will be able to get out of the cycle of birth and death. So that's the process. Even a jnani yogi or ashtanga yogi, even though he is so well versed in his Ashtanga Yoga process or the Jnana Yoga process, if he has to rise to the level of Bhakti Yogi, he has to have this mercy of the devotees. So that's the qualification which takes one from the other paths and takes them to the Bhakti Yoga path. So so we have heard this in multiple places that Bhakti Yoga is the highest. But what does this actually mean? Like, so we know that we have to render loving service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we need to understand from the moods of the previous acharyas in terms of what it actually means. So there is a verse from, there are a couple of verses from the Mukundamala Stotra where Kulasekara Alvar establishes this mood. He says, मुकुन्दमूर्ध्ना प्रणिपत्य याचे भवन्त एकान्तम् इवन्तमर्थम् अविस्मृतिस्तच्चरणारविन्दं भवे भवेन्नेस्ति भवत्प्रसादात्. He said, O Mukunda, I place my head on your lotus feet and I beg this. This is my only desire, life after life, that I want to just remember your lotus feet. So this is, and then serve your lotus feet. So, bhave bhave mestu bhavat prasadat. Because of your grace, I just want to serve you. So that's the mood which all the acharyas they have. And he says, Diviva bhuviva narak mamastu vasam narakeva narakantaka prakamam avadit dirita sharadara vindo charanepi maranepi sintayami. So he says, I can be in the heaven or hell, or I can placed in whatever situation it is, and it's your desire, but all I want to do is just think about your smiling lotus face. So this is the mood of a bhakti yogi. So the path of bhakti, even though it's very simple, because it's a process of love, and it's a positive process than the other process. For example, in Jnana Yoga, you have to control your senses and detach from not thinking about sensual enjoyment, and think about what is the use your intelligence to go above and beyond this material realm. And similarly, the Ashtanga yogis, through the yogic process of the Eightfold Mysticism, they do all kinds of asanas, yogas, pranayama, and everything to get to a place that they are out of this sense realm. So it's a very fraught process, and it's a negative process in the sense that you control your senses. But in the Bhakti Yoga, the senses are utilized in the process in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this verse, I got reminded of a verse from Mukundamala Stotra again. So it says, Jihve kirte Keshava. O tongue, sing the glories of Keshava. Muraripum cheto bhaja Sridharam. So he says, Muraripu cheto bhaja. O mind, think about the killer of Murari, who is the killer of the Mura demon. And cheto bhaja Sridharam. So, Panidvanda Samarchita. So, two hands go and serve the Sridhara. Panidvanda Samarchita. Achyuta Katha Shrotra Dvayam Tam Shrunu. Oh, 2 years hear about the glories of Achyuta. And so Krishnam Lokaye Lochanam, the Dvaya Hare Gachangri Yugmalayam. So, two eyes just see the beautiful form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and two ears hear about the glories of Achyuta. And then Jigra Grana Mukunda Pada Tulasi Murdan Namo Dokshajam. Oh, nose, smell the beautiful tulsi leaves of which are offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and head bow down to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the bhakti process is so positive that you can engage all your senses in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's the glory of the bhakti yoga, because it's a positive process where the senses are utilized in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in the other process, it's negative because you have to control either through your intelligence or through the Ashtanga yogic process. The senses are controlled, and eventually the detachment from matter comes in those processes of yogic process as well. And there are so many beautiful verses and in the Vaishnava bhajans which goes and talks about the glories of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead and using our senses in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I got reminded of one such verse from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song. So he says, Maya jale baddha hoye আছো মিছো কাভালোয়ে মায়া জলে বাধ্য হয়ে আছো মিছো কাবালোয়ে একো নাচে তানা পায়ে রাধা মাধব নাম বলো রে. So he says, we have been caught in this material cycle, the Maya Jala, and in this contraption of Maya for so long. Maya Jale Baddha Hue Na Baji Acho Micho Kabaloya, and they're getting caught in this so for so many births and so many lifetimes. And so what he says is Eko Nache Tanapaye Radha Madhava Nam Bulore. So with one pointed attention, focus all your attention on this birth just to chant the names of Radha Madhav. And because of that, what will happen? It says, Jivana hoi lo sesh na bajilo Rishikesh. We don't know how much life we have left. So our goal should be just to serve Rishikesh. And this is the Upadesh which Bhakti Vinod Thakur gives in this beautiful bhajan. So what we understand is that the senses, Srila Prabhupada very clearly explains that the senses are actually symptoms of life. So if you stop the symptoms of life, it's almost as if like you are encountering voluntary death. So Srila Prabhupada, so that's why bhakti is a positive process, and it's a very lively process. And so even in the Jnana Yoga stage, if you attain the Brahma Jyoti platform, it's mentioned that once after the achieving the Brahman realization, it's mentioned that people, the persons in the Brahman platform, they don't have any activity to do because they've just restrained their senses, and they have gotten to this path of Jnana Yoga where they're constantly using their intelligence, and there is no activity per se. So basically, they get so tired and they get bored, and so they come back to this material world again. And that's how the process of Jnana Yoga is fraught with difficulties, because it's there's no activities per se. But bhakti is a positive process, and with positive engagement of the senses in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, bhakti yoga gradually purifies ones and then takes it to the highest perfection. So it's mentioned that the goal of bhakti yoga is Rishikena Sevanam Bhakti Muchate. So it says, you have to serve the Lord of the senses, Rishikena, Rishikesha Sevanam. Rishikesha is the Lord of the senses, Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you have to serve him with the Rishik, which is the senses. And that is the goal of Bhakti Yoga. So with that, I would like to conclude. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity.